So what we're going to do is we're going to spend a few minutes just kind of giving an overview of what the intent is behind this project. And then for the half of you who didn't raise your hand, I think there's a lot of mixed opinions about, mixed understandings about what's going on with this initiative. And so we want to create a lot more time for Q&A than might normally be acceptable, socially acceptable. So we're just going to run through it and kind of tell you guys about what it is to start out with.
Excellent. Well, thank you for coming. As Yessie gave a great introduction, my name's Krobe. I do security stuff on the internet. My partner Eddie from Sonatype does a lot more security stuff on the internet and a lot of other places. We both have been upstream community members for quite some time. We are kind of two of the instigators and cheerleaders for the open source project security baseline. This is an effort we started back in 2024, and it is not a new concept. Anyone here work in an enterprise where before you put systems online, you have to go through a checklist of things before that system is authorized to go into production? Yeah. So that's where the baseline was kind of inspired from. A list of good and interesting things that people should do prior to going to production. In open source, again, we're always live, always releasing, so it's not exactly a precise parallel, but the concept is kind of the same. There's a bunch of good things you should do to help improve your security, and that kind of sets the expectation that you're responsible, you're following secure development practices, and you care about the project, you care about your users. Why don't you talk about what we have today, Eddie?
Yeah, so do we have slides to create a visual correlation for this? Yeah, level 1, level 2, level 3. So the inspiration here was we want to create a literal baseline of just things that any open source project should do. And these are like common sense, not really debatable, unless your platform literally cannot comprehend what multi-factor authentication is, then maybe we could debate something. But it's protected branches, MFA, things like that. Then in the same way that most of our foundational projects have multiple levels to it, like a sandbox incubating graduated type of situation, we have additional levels to increase the rigmarole. So they're more complex as it goes up. All of these are machine readable, so we're able to take these and very quickly create integrations with other systems. And Krobe, I think I hit everything you wanted me to hit on.
Yeah, well, and think about this. The baseline is a combination of security configurations, documentations, and artifacts. Who here is a software engineer, infrastructure engineer? So if you are, keep your hand raised if you love doing documentation. Yeah, but ideally, we feel, and that's why I like baseline level 1, we feel this is something that a single maintainer project should be able to take on and do in a reasonably short period of time. Change some configurations in your source code management, your CI system, and then create some simple documents. What's your security policy? I don't care what your security policy is, but I'd like you to tell your users and your downstream what their expectations should be around how you're going to find and fix problems. I think it's probably level 2. We ask people, please make an SBOM, and we have some tooling that we're working on to help downstream identify where that SBOM is, make sure that it's digitally signed, the integrity that's protected, and that maybe you trust Eddie. Maybe you don't, but I will show you where Eddie's signed SBOM is.
Yeah, and then on the third layer, we're also adding in some design concepts where it's like, hey, write down what your secure design is. And we have some guides that are maintained by John and Justin around how to do these kinds of design assessments for your security projects. Those are all available in the OpenSSF and also living documents meant to be maintained by all of us together.
And now we'll get to my favorite part.
Oh.
So I have a long history in banking, as does Eddie, being very integrally involved in FINOS like he is. Well, the bank I worked at, I had multiple laws or multiple regulators and requirements that I had to follow. So it was always kind of cumberplex from an engineering perspective to making sure that I have the system configured in a way that met these different regulatory regimes. And then when you think about upstream open source maintainers, they really don't care. They're not aware of. They're generally not constrained by these same requirements that a commercial enterprise or a vendor might be. So that's where the open source security baseline, we have our control catalog. So we have these 40 recommended controls spread across those 3 levels. And then we've mapped it across a whole regime of different cybersecurity frameworks, different laws, different kind of best practices. So the very first thing we lined this up to was the EU's Cyber Resilience Act. And fun fact, if you look at Annex 1, there's 21 requirements documented there. If your project, or as a manufacturer, your offering follows the baseline and has those evidence compiled, you will fulfill 19 of the 21 requirements that the CRA asks for. The only things we don't cover are about data protection, and then the EU with GDPR had the concept of a citizen being able to be forgotten by a system. So I don't do anything with the baseline with that. So you, the project, or you, a manufacturer, need to figure that out. But the 19 other requirements, these are all security best practices that have been around for 30 or more years. So we're just kind of helping you demonstrate the value and those processes that you've done. But we've mapped through things like NIST Secure Software Development Lifecycle, 800-161. I'll be doing the software acquisition guide, if that's still around next week. But we've done the CRA. I'll be doing DORA, which our friends in FINOS should be happy about. That's a European banking regulation. I'm looking at things in the UK. I've lined it up with all the OpenSSF projects. And fun fact, if you have been like a long-time user of Dr. Wheeler's Best Practices badge, a lot of the requirements from that badge are baked into the baseline controls. The same thing with the security scorecard. Is we're leveraging all this good practices, same thing with SALSA. So I'm showing you, like, if you're SALSA level 2, here's all these tick boxes that you're able to justify, or kind of defend yourself from an audit or regulatory standpoint. And then we look at things like PCI, OWASP-SAM, OWASP-CRE, OpenChain, and then there's a development project called the Proactive Supply Chain Risk Management Framework. So I'm working with those professors that are kind of creating this framework. So again, I'm showing you if you, for example, fulfill MFA, you're able to kind of tick all these boxes off on all these different regimes and frameworks. Anything you want to talk about compliance? It's awesome. All right. And this is our value proposition. We're looking both up and downstream. And maybe, Eddie, you want to talk about kind of what the value, the baseline is for upstream maintainers in projects?
Yeah, so I think this is, so the words on the screen are all true and they're good, and read those, that's awesome. I think this is a good point to stop and be like, hasn't this been done before? Like, don't we have scorecard? Don't we have best practices badge? Like these, like what are we doing? Why are we doing this again? And that's a really, really fair question. It is a question that we asked ourselves before starting. It was like, why are we even talking about this? Like, why is this a need that we feel like we need a working group to even discuss? And the issue is that, well, best practices badge might be an exclusion from this, but a lot of the different tools that are available to measure the quality or the security of an open source project have been built based on what can be measured, which is a really good way to start. Mm-hmm. That's how everything should start. What can I do? Let me do it well. Scorecard is one of those. Does it phenomenally well. Measures things that can be measured and then gives you a score, gives you feedback and output on those. Our intent is to create a score control catalog that is not what can we measure, but what do we care about. Mm-hmm. And now what Scorecard can do, and the last conversation I had, this is on the roadmap. Oh, Spencer, is this still on the roadmap? Yeah, so there's still discussions about like, how can this control catalog be brought into our measurement tools and systems, right? And that's something that we've done with LFX. We've taken this control catalog, we've built out some systems to evaluate projects and then display it onto LFX Insights. The biggest difference between baseline and scorecard is that scorecard has a baseline in it. Scorecard has a set of checks that are already written in there. They're tested extremely well, extremely effectively. But we're saying, hey, what if we take a step back and just think about the controls? And that's what the baseline's doing. And that's kind of one of the things I wanted to highlight.
And absolutely. And again, we came at this from a regulatory compliance standpoint. The group started talking around the time the European Union was floating out the initial drafts of the CRA, and it was pretty scary. And we understood there's going to be some pretty severe obligations and consequences, both up and downstream. We wanted to help prepare the ecosystem. And again, these are expected practices. So if you go through any kind of CIS, MIS program, you're going to be learning a lot of these concepts. And it's just a matter of let's help you implement and execute on it. But again, so we think there's a lot of value upstream. And mainly, one of my favorite goals is we'd like to kind of collect these common downstream requests, like where is your SBOM? What is your contribution policy? How many maintainers do you have? And be able to let a project express this in a machine-readable, automated fashion, and let downstream, if you choose to use that project, figure it out. The project is stating their truth. Here's where my documentation is. You can take that and do with it what you will. But then kind of flipping that, look from a downstream perspective, this is a great list of things that your procurement team or your OSPO or an engineering team can take a look at and say, these are a reasonable set of expectations of when I am evaluating any software, open or closed, and these are the types of things I need to do to be able to meet our business objectives and our regulatory obligations. This is a really old kind of proposed reference diagram of how this system works. So Eddie, do you want to talk a little bit about Gamara and kind of talk about how we're thinking about this whole system within different tiers with the catalog and all the different tooling getting out to presentation?
Yeah, I'll be quick. I'd like to, how many slides do we have after this?
I don't know. How long do we have?
Oh, yeah.
7 minutes.
All right, yeah, I'd like to do Q&A. Yeah, so one of the big things we want to do is we're focusing on this as a control catalog, so that way we can map upward to guidelines and pass it down to policy development, pass that into evaluation, pass that down into enforcement. And just having that kind of language of isolating the different work streams and activities is a big focus. And there's several different things that are already being developed out in the ecosystem. We have privateers being used by LFX right now. Scorecard fits into this space, into this vision. Same with Minder. Those are both active open source projects. Then there are contributors in OpenSSF right now who are working on Darn It and Ampel that are both fitting into this enforcement space. So there's a lot of different folks that are developing different things. And then there's the ever-looming conversation about best practices batch. Yeah. Ever-looming.
And all of these all these projects are focused on slightly different perspectives of this problem. Some things are looking at like policy enforcement. Some are looking at automating the actual implementation of the controls for developers. So we give a lot of different perspectives on how we can kind of collectively leverage this catalog.
Cool. All right.
So here we are, questions and answers.
Questions and complaints. I want to field both.
So I like a lot of this. I think there's interesting things here, but I do have a couple of kind of comments here. So one is the noble goal of trying to say these are the right things you should be doing makes sense. But as we've seen with the need for things like VEX, if you are not measuring things well and scoring things inaccurately, this can actually cause consternation and a lot of problems that didn't exist beforehand. So Have you done and gone things like, for instance, Dr. David Wheeler, PhD, has this wonderful, best practices thing. Have you gone and looked at the projects that achieve things like gold best practice badges and then match them to see how well they do according to your automated scraping? Mm-hmm. Because the, not complete but, selective analysis I've done of that says that Dr. David Wheeler's gold badge, which is very hard to obtain, I think only like 30 projects or 25 projects have it or something, those projects score actually fairly low according to the way you're scraping data.
So I'll start while Eddie gets the mic back. We haven't done the in-depth side-by-side comparison yet.
Yeah. Also, it's just one of the things that I want to highlight, and we need to spend more time on this together, is that the control catalog and the evaluation of the control catalog are intentionally segmented, because we should be able to argue about what should be measured, right? Let's argue about what do we care about, and then let's argue about how are we measuring it, so that way we can version control those independently.
And we have had, Dr. Wheeler has been involved with this from the beginning. And again, the CI best practices badge that evolved into the OpenSSF badge predates a lot of this. And David had a very particular perspective when they were crafting the original badge. And there are some things that we are not looking for in the baseline. Like he looks a lot at cryptography and other things. And ours is more sourced from something like ISO 27001, 27002 that an enterprise would leverage. So we are in the process of looking at the delta. But I have already gone through and mapped as part of the compliance matrix to show you if you do X or Y requirement, here is where you have a tick box for the badge. And we haven't gone through and kind of negotiated the delta of what we don't have coverage on yet, and kind of why David was looking this way or why scorecard might look in that way.
So I just want to add one more super quick follow-on. I know that someone else has a question, but it's not so much whether it's not so much whether something's being met, it's whether you're detecting it's being met, and whether you're doing things like weighing archived repositories under an organization that are clearly marked as such equally with a production repository that actually matters, and all of those types of issues. I was just making the comment that everyone probably should know, maybe there's ongoing work, pull requests are welcome and stuff. That's really what
we're
I was
not
trying
done.
to
This
get out.
Evolves every day. That is a problem that the Orbit group has talked about. That is something we need to discuss, and probably leveraging something like Security Insights to allow the project to say these repos are in scope, these are not, will help get more accurate results. But our goal is not scoring. I just want to show these are some good practices. I want you to use them, and here's something you can use to evaluate software. But yeah, that's something we're thinking about. Patch is welcome. Come on, join the conversation.
Yeah, I just have a few suggestions to include additional cyber frameworks like NIST AI Risk Management Framework, and also Cloud Security Alliance has all CCM and LLM Security Framework, as well as OWASP Top 10 LLM Security Framework.
So we have another group that love the baseline so much, they are starting efforts on a baseline for AI. So all of the AI topics absolutely will be included. I have been a long fan of the CSA's Cloud Controls Matrix, so that is actually what helped inspire our matrix. I have not directly done the mapping because they do things like COBIT and other stuff, but that will be potentially in the queue. But it takes 8 to 20 hours to do the mapping, so that's a slow process, and I'm the only one doing it. Patch is welcome.
Yeah, plus it gives the scorecard as well in the CCM.
Yep.